So, Alex Pereira is coming off an amazing title defense against Khalil Roundtree, and ever since he moved up to light heavyweight, he's been tearing through most of the top contenders, and now he has 3 title defenses. And I think it's time to ask ourselves, who can really beat this guy? And he has lost once before in the UFC to Israel Adesanya, but let's be real, Pereira at middleweight and Pereira at light heavyweight are very different. At middleweight, he's extremely weight drained, which has an obvious effect on his chin, but at light heavyweight, he's a lot more hydrated and durable. Not to mention the fact that Adesanya was in a lot of trouble in their last fight. He was clearly getting outstruck in the first and especially in the second round. So I don't think it's too crazy to say another Adesanya fight would turn out a lot different at light heavyweight. But anyways, the first opponent who I think is the most likely to be his next fight is Magomed Ankalaev. But that is if Ankalaev beats Rakic, who is quite a difficult fight for him. But if he does, he will undeniably be next in line for a title shot. And at that point, I don't think the UFC can justify a bigger fight with DDP. And I do think Ankalaev is the hardest stylistical matchup at light heavyweight for Pereira. Taking into consideration that Ankalaev is a very good grappler and Pereira is still pretty new to grappling. The problem though is that Ankalaev has gone out and said he's gonna stand with Pereira, and I'm gonna go out and say that's just a bad idea, man. Like, basically all of the opponents that did well against Pereira did it by using their grappling. Adesanya did very well in their first fight by utilizing his grappling, Blachowicz did well by taking him down and taking the back in the first round, and Jiri did decent in their first fight as well before getting knocked out. And that's because the grappling takes away Pereira's best weapon, his striking. On the ground he can't kick your leg and he can't knock you out with a left hook, so if I was Ankalaev, I would definitely be shooting takedowns in this fight. Cause let's be real here, when it comes to the stand-up, most people can't hold a candle against Pereira. But something I will say though is that Ankalaev is actually a very good striker. He doesn't really use a whole lot of kicks, but he's very technically sound when it comes to the boxing. He knocked out Johnny Walker, man. That was a pretty bad example though, cause who hasn't, like some 19-year-old just did. But Ankalaev has very good technique and very strong counter game, but that's almost a double-edged sword for him, cause sometimes he relies a bit too much on his opponents going first, so he can defend and come back with a counter. And a very obvious weakness he has is the leg kicks. Blachowicz destroyed his legs in their fight, and I would definitely say Pereira has better leg kicks, and I've seen some people online saying that Ankalaev is a better boxer than Pereira, and I don't know if they're trolling, but I definitely disagree. When have we ever seen Ankalaev move like Pereira did in the 3rd and 4th round against Roundtree? And not to mention the power difference. Pereira is undeniably the most powerful puncher at light heavyweight. So it only takes one shot from this guy and he's extremely good at setting up his most powerful shot, aka his left hook. But logically speaking, Ankalaev will probably try to take Pereira down, which would be his best move. And I definitely think he has the ability to take Pereira down, but Pereira has improved a lot in his grappling since he joined the UFC. He was, for example, able to survive an entire round with Blachowicz on his back. And I know Blachowicz isn't as good of a grappler, but it's still a pretty impressive feat. And in their second fight, when Jiri tried to change level against Pereira in order to shoot, Pereira would counter him by kinda changing levels himself and throwing a jab, which stopped Jiri from being able to shoot in. And another threat for Ankalaev is that in order to take Pereira down, he will have to enter into range where Pereira can hit him with something big. And that's always a big risk. In my opinion, I think Ankalaev would lose here. He has gone out and said that he will strike with Pereira, and I don't think that's completely true. I think he would mix it up in this fight. I see him probably starting off on the feet against him, then mixing in the takedowns as the fight goes on. And on the feet, I think he's gonna get lit up by Pereira's leg kicks, aka the best leg kicks in the game right now. And we already saw in the Blachowicz fight that Ankalaev has quite a big weakness against leg kicks. And the fact that Ankalaev relies so heavily on counters isn't gonna do him any favors here. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes he relies a bit too much on his opponents going first, so Pereira can probably just stay out of boxing range in this fight and just focus on taking away his legs. And if Ankalaev enters into boxing range, he will have to face the power of Pereira head on, which is a pretty bad idea even if Ankalaev is a good boxer, because all it takes from Pereira is literally just one left hook and it's over. And Ankalaev is a very good grappler, but people have this idea that Pereira is a complete slouch. And I simply don't think that's true. He has had a lot of time to improve his grappling, and most likely he's been working his grappling like crazy because his striking was already world class. And I don't think he's a particularly good grappler, but he has shown that he is able to defend pretty well on the ground. And Ankalaev isn't really a submission artist either. In fact, he has 0 submissions in the UFC, so I don't think there's too much danger on the ground either. And in between the grappling sequences, I think there's going to be windows where Pereira will be able to knock Ankalaev out. So as of right now, I would go with Pereira in this fight. But anyways, moving on to the next potential opponent, and that is Dricus du Plessis. And this is a pretty probable matchup, to be honest. If DDP beats Strickland and Ankalaev loses to Rakic, I think the UFC should be looking to make this fight, and when they first started beefing, this fight could have potentially taken place at middleweight and at light heavyweight, but after its last fight, I think Pereira made it very clear that he won't move down in weight. But I'll quickly go over what I think would happen if DDP and Pereira fought at middleweight. So in this fight, DDP is obviously not going to want to stand with Pereira. He's quite lead leg heavy, which makes him very open for leg kicks, which is one of Pereira's specialties, and he's also quite open on the feet. But I still think the reality here is that Pereira would most likely lose. Don't get me wrong, at middleweight Pereira is still a beast, but I just feel like the weight cut has such a negative effect on him, especially on his chin, because he got chinned by Adesanya, but he was able to take clean shots from someone like Jiri and eat a clean head kick from Roundtree like it was nothing. And overall, every outside factor is just going to be against him. He's going to be weaker, and his cardio is also going to be compromised. And DDP fights with his physique, you know, he's very strong and all that, so I can just see DDP bullying him in the grappling, especially since Pereira's never fought a grappler as good as DDP before. Now at light heavyweight, I believe it's going to be a completely different story. Pereira is not going to be weight drained, he's also going to be fighting closer to his natural weight. This means that his shin won't be as affected, his cardio also won't be as affected. Not that he has any problems with his cardio, but the less weight you cut, the more energy you're going to have. And as I mentioned earlier, DDP gets hit quite a lot, and people might say he was able to take clean shots from Adesanya and just shat his way through, but Adesanya ain't Pereira. Pereira's one of the hardest hitters in the sport. Everyone who gets touched clean by this guy's left hook has been severely hurt, except Bruno Silva somehow, but you get my point. Someone who gets hit a lot is not generally gonna perform too well on the feet against someone who hits really hard, and DDP is usually just waddling forward and getting into exchanges, but I think it's gonna be very different in this fight. Cause I know his shin is goated and all that, but so was Jiri's and he got put to sleep, so I think DDP is gonna be a lot more hesitant to enter into boxing range, and at kicking range he's gonna get absolutely destroyed by Pereira. Pereira's a way better striker, and as I mentioned earlier, DDP stands pretty lead leg heavy, so I think his legs are gonna get absolutely destroyed by Pereira's leg kicks. Now can DDP still win? Absolutely, but the key to victory is to wrestle Pereira. As I said before, basically every time someone has done well against him, it's been because they've taken advantage of his lack of grappling skills, which obviously aren't that good. And I think out of everyone Pereira has fought, DDP definitely has the best grappling, so this fight could get very competitive. But the problem is, if DDP is going to want to take down Pereira, he is going to have to enter into boxing range or set up his takedowns by getting into exchanges. And if he does that, he is going to run the risk of getting extremely hurt. And even if he gets Pereira down to the ground, Pereira has improved a lot in his grappling. Like, he survived with Jan Blachowicz on his back for an entire round. Granted, Blachowicz isn't a better grappler than DDP, but I still think it's something you have to factor in. So at light heavyweight, I'd go with Pereira, but at middleweight, I would have to go with DDP. But regardless, I think this would be a crazy fight because both of them are some of the most entertaining fighters to watch right now, and the fight will probably take place at light heavyweight. Anyways, moving on to the final potential opponent, and that's Tom Aspinall. And first of all, this would be one crazy fight. Tom Aspinall has put out every top contender he's fought in the first round. This guy's the real heavyweight champ right now. Jones's belt is worth less than Aspinall's, plus Jones has been ducking Aspinall, so if Pereira wants to move up, I think he should go up and fight Aspinall for a GOAT fight. Cause let's be real here, if Pereira beats Aspinall, I think there's a very good argument for him being the GOAT of the sport. But beating Aspinall is easier said than done. He's definitely the most dangerous heavyweight right now. But let's start off by talking about their striking, and they're both very good strikers, but they're quite different from each other. Aspinall's striking is more centered around his boxing, while I would say Pereira's striking is more well-rounded. He uses a lot of kicks in combination with his hands. And Aspinall also has very good head movement, which I think Pereira kinda lacks in, even though he displayed great head movement in his last fight. He prefers rolling with punches instead, and Aspinall is also very fast for heavyweight. Aside from maybe Gon, I would probably say he's the fastest heavyweight right now. And speed is very useful to have in a division where everyone else is a slow blob. And since he's so fast, he uses a lot of blitzes, and blitzes are a very good way of attacking, especially if you have the speed advantage. But the blitz has a very big weakness, and that is counters, because if you get countered while blitzing in, you're gonna get very hurt. And I think this is due to two reasons. First of all, it's harder to see the counter punch, and second of all, you're moving into the counter punch. And the best example of this is Whitaker versus DDP, where DDP timed Whitaker with a southpaw jab, and I definitely think Pereira is capable of doing something similar, but the problem is that in his last fight, he had a lot of trouble dealing with the speed of Roundtree, and Roundtree was able to land a lot of pretty significant shots on Pereira in the early rounds. And I certainly think Aspinall is a lot more powerful than what Roundtree is. On the other hand, Pereira has a very high fight IQ. He was able to adapt and switch up his strategy mid-fight against Roundtree, so if Aspinall doesn't put him out early in this fight, he is going to be in a lot of trouble. And it's also worth mentioning that since Aspinall moves around a lot, he's very susceptible to leg kicks, and the oldest trick in the book used to limit the movement of your opponent is the leg kicks, so I can definitely see Aspinall's legs getting chewed up in this fight. And the longer this fight goes on the feet, the more disadvantaged Aspinall is going to be, because Pereira is going to have the time to adapt to Aspinall's style and speed while he's been chipping away at his legs. But we haven't even talked about the grappling aspect yet, and Aspinall is a smart fighter, so I could definitely see him shooting a lot on Pereira in this fight. And when it comes to the grappling, Aspinall is a problem for Pereira, because even though he might not be as skilled on the ground as someone like Ankalaev, he's still significantly larger than what Ankalaev is, and he's probably a lot stronger as well. He's also very fast when it comes to shooting in, and Aspinall was able to submit Volkov in the first round, so if he does choose to use his grappling in this fight, I can see Pereira having a really hard time. And I actually think Pereira would lose here. On the feet is quite even, but Pereira struggled a lot against Roundtree, and Roundtree wasn't really able to severely hurt Pereira. I don't think the supposed knockdown was really a knockdown. I thought it was more of the fact that he was on one leg and kind of lost his balance, but Aspinall is a lot more powerful than Roundtree, and if Aspinall is landing the same weight Roundtree was landing, I could definitely see Pereira out cold. But there are two scenarios where I can see Pereira winning though. The first one is if he catches Aspinall with a check left hook as Aspinall blitzes in, kinda like he did to Jiri, and the other scenario is that he avoids boxing exchanges and prioritizes leg kicks early in the fight, and when Aspinall eventually starts to slow down due to the leg kicks, Pereira's had plenty of time to adapt to Aspinall's style and puts him out. But I still think the more probable outcome is that Aspinall finishes him early in the fight, since Roundtree was able to do so well because of his speed, and Aspinall is a lot more powerful and the better boxer than Roundtree. And if you also factor in the grappling, where Aspinall has very fast entries, good ground and pound, with decent submission ability, I just think it's going to be too much to deal with for Pereira. But these three matchups are all very exciting in my opinion, and we could very well get to see all of them, which would be crazy. But that's it for today guys. Check out my last video where I list the most entertaining fighters in each division. Anyways, thanks for watching, subscribe, leave a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Am I just another Pereira glazer, or was I spitting facts? Also share this video to every MMA fan you know, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.